The silence of the Blackwood Reserve wasn't empty. It was heavy. It was a living thing that watched you, judged you, and decided if you belonged. Elias belonged. For 10 years, since he hung up his ranger uniform and retreated to this isolated cabin, he had respected the silence. That evening, a storm was brewing. The air tasted metallic, like ozone and wet pine needles. Elias was stacking firewood on his porch, the rhythmic thwack of his axe the only man-made sound for 20 miles. Then he heard it. It wasn't the roar of a predator. It was a sound so out of place, so impossibly fragile in this brutal landscape that Elias stopped mid-swing. It was a high-pitched, desperate mewling, like a domestic kitten lost in a blizzard. He lowered the axe, his heart hammering against his ribs. Nothing small survived out here alone, especially not with a storm rolling in. He grabbed his rifle, old habits died hard, and stepped off the porch into the darkening tree line. He didn't have to go far. 10 yards into the dense underbrush, curled beneath the sprawling roots of an ancient oak tree, was a splash of impossible orange against the decaying brown leaves. Elias froze. It was a tiger cub, no bigger than a house cat, its stripes still fuzzy and indistinct. Its eyes were squeezed shut, crying out to a mother that was nowhere to be seen. But the shocking part wasn't just finding a tiger cub alone. The shocking part happened when Elias took a cautious step backward, intending to retreat. The cub's eyes snapped open, brilliant, terrifying blue pools, and locked onto him. It didn't hiss, it didn't cower. It scrambled over the roots, stumbling on paws too big for its body, and ran straight to Elias's muddy boot, pressing its tiny, shivering body against his leg. It wasn't attacking. It was asking for help. Elias didn't move. He barely breathed. In the wild, a lone cub meant one of two things. The mother was dead, or she was close enough to kill you before you heard her coming. He scanned the dense, swaying tree line, his grip on the rifle white-knuckled. The wind howled through the canopy, masking the snap of twigs or the heavy pad of a paw. Every shadow looked like a crouching tigress ready to launch. But minutes passed, and the forest remained indifferent. No angry roar. No flash of orange stripes charging from the gloom. The cub let out another high-pitched cry, its tiny claws digging through Elias's denim jeans, anchoring itself to him as the first fat drops of rain began to slap against the leaves. "You're going to get us both killed," Elias whispered, his voice rough from disuse. He tried to gently shake his leg, to dislodge the creature and retreat to the safety of his cabin. The laws of nature were absolute, survival of the fittest. You don't interfere. But the cub didn't let go. Instead, it looked up again, and in that split second of lightning illuminating the forest floor, Elias saw something that shattered his resolve. The cub wasn't just shivering from cold, it was trembling from trauma. A crack of thunder shook the ground. The skies opened up, a torrential downpour that turned the dust to mud instantly. "Damn it!" Elias cursed. He bent down, scooping the animal up with one hand. It was heavier than it looked, a dense ball of muscle and loose skin. He didn't run, but he moved fast, backing onto the porch and slamming the heavy oak door behind him, bolting it shut against the storm. Inside, the cabin was warm, lit by the golden glow of a kerosene lamp. Elias placed the dripping creature on his rough-hewn table. Now in the light, the truth began to emerge. The cub didn't smell like the forest, like pine, musk, and decay. As Elias leaned in, his nose wrinkled. The animal smelled of rubbing alcohol and sterile latex, and when he brushed the wet fur aside at the nape of its neck, he found it, a patch of shaved skin and a fresh surgical scar. This wasn't a wild animal. It was a fugitive. Elias pulled the old magnifying lamp closer, the swinging arm squeaking in the quiet cabin. The tiger cub, who he had mentally started calling Raji simply because he couldn't keep thinking of him as it, lay limp on the towel, exhausted by the storm and whatever ordeal he had escaped. Under the harsh light, the patch of shaved skin on Raji's neck revealed a terrifying precision. The stitches were minute, done with a steady, professional hand. This wasn't the crude work of a backyard exotic pet owner. This was high-end veterinary work, or laboratory work. Elias ran his thumb gently over the scar. Raji flinched in his sleep, a low, bubbling growl vibrating in his chest, but he didn't wake. Under the skin, Elias felt a hard, rectangular lump. "They didn't just cut you," Elias muttered, his stomach churning. "They put something in you." He moved to his equipment locker. Although retired, Elias had kept his old Ranger gear. He dug out a universal microchip scanner, a heavy black brick of plastic usually used to identify tagged bears or wolves in the reserve. He returned to the table and pressed the trigger near the cub's neck. Beep. The screen didn't display a standard conservation ID number. Instead, it flashed a series of scrolling encrypted characters and a single pulsing word. Active. It's a transmitter, Elias realized, the blood draining from his face. A GPS tracker. If the signal was active, they knew exactly where the cub was. And by extension, they knew exactly where Elias was. He looked at the window. The storm was ferocious, a wall of black rain and wind. No helicopter could fly in this, and no truck could navigate the washed-out logging roads tonight. He had bought himself a few hours of safety, courtesy of Mother Nature, but by dawn he would have visitors. He needed help. He needed someone who could remove the device without killing the cub, and someone who wouldn't ask questions that would get them both thrown in jail. He picked up his satellite phone. There was only one number programmed into the speed dial. Dr. Lena Rostova picked up on the second ring. "Elias, it's 3 a.m. Unless the forest is on fire, this better be good. I need you at the cabin," Elias said, skipping the pleasantries. "Bring your surgical kit and a signal jammer if you still have that piece of junk from your research days." "Surgical kit?" Lena's voice shifted from sleepy to sharp. "Elias, are you hurt?" "Not me," Elias said, looking down at Raji. The cub had rolled onto his back, exposing a soft white belly, his paws twitching as he dreamed. It was a display of total domestic trust that no wild animal should ever possess. "I found a stray. He's hurt, he's terrified, and he's broadcasting his location to people I don't think we want to meet." "A stray dog?" "No," Elias said softly. "A tiger." The silence on the other end was absolute. "I'm leaving now," Lena said. "Keep him warm. And Elias, don't let him out of your sight." Elias hung up. He grabbed a roll of heavy-duty aluminum foil from his kitchen, a desperate low-tech attempt to dampen the signal, and gently draped it over the sleeping cub. It was ridiculous, but it was all he had. He sat in his armchair, rifle across his lap, and waited for the dawn. The rain stopped at dawn, leaving the forest steaming in a thick grey fog. The silence was broken by the roar of an engine, not a military truck, but the familiar sputtering cough of Lena's vintage Land Rover, struggling up the muddy incline. Elias met her at the door, rifle lowered but not safetied. Dr. Lena Rostova burst in, carrying a silver medical case and shaking wet hair from her face. She stopped dead in her tracks when she saw the table. "Aluminum foil, Elias. Really?" "It worked," Elias grunted, peeling back the makeshift shield. "He hasn't moved." Lena approached the table, her professional mask slipping for a fraction of a second. She reached out, her hand hovering over Raji's flank. "My God," she whispered, "he's magnificent. And he's wrong." "Wrong how?" "His muscle density," Lena murmured, palpating the sleeping cub's shoulder. "He's too heavy for his size, too developed. This isn't natural growth." She snapped on a pair of latex gloves. "Hold the light. If that chip is active, we have minutes before the signal retriangulates now that the storm has passed." The next 20 minutes were a blur of focused tension. Elias held the flashlight steady, the beam cutting through the gloom of the cabin, illuminating the surgical site on the cub's neck. Lena worked with terrifying speed, scalpel flashing. Raji whimpered once, his paws twitching, but the sedative Lena had administered kept him under. "Got it," Lena hissed. There was a sickening squelch, and she pulled out a capsule the size of a thumb drive. It wasn't the standard glass cylinder of a pet ID chip. It was black metal, pulsing with a faint red LED. She didn't just toss it in the trash. She dropped it into a heavy lead-lined canister she had brought, screwing the lid shut tight. The red light vanished. The signal was dead. "Is he safe?" Elias asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "From the tracking?" "Yes," Lena said, stitching the wound closed with practiced hands. But Elias, look at this. She pulled a portable reader from her bag and connected it to the biomonitor she had hooked up to the cub. I analyzed his blood while the anesthesia took hold, she said, turning the screen toward Elias. His white blood cell count is through the roof, and his DNA, it has markers I've only seen in classified papers, gene editing, CRISPR sequences designed to inhibit fear responses and accelerate healing. Elias looked down at the sleeping cub. He's a weapon. He's a prototype, Lena corrected, her voice grim. Someone is trying to build a better predator, and they lost unit number 1. Raji began to stir. The anesthesia was wearing off faster than it should have, proof of his accelerated metabolism. His blue eyes fluttered open. He didn't look at Lena, the stranger. He looked immediately for Elias. He let out a soft chuff sound and dragged his heavy, groggy body across the table until his head rested on Elias's arm. He imprinted on you, Lena said quietly, watching the interaction. To him, you aren't just a human. You're the pack. I need to take a breath here, and I bet you do too. It's intense realizing that this innocent little cub is caught in something so dark. But look at that moment. Despite all the science and the danger, he just wants to rest his head on someone he trusts. That feeling of finding your safe person is universal, isn't it? Whether you have 2 legs or 4. I am so happy you are here holding space with us for Raji. If you're feeling protective of him right now, you're exactly the kind of person this community is built for. I'd love for you to stick around so we can see this through together. And hey, tell me in the comments, who or what animal is your safe harbor when the storms roll in? I read every single one, and I'd love to know who has your back. The peace of the morning lasted exactly 10 minutes. It wasn't a sound that alerted them. It was Raji. The cub, who had been affectionately nuzzling Elias's arm, suddenly went rigid. His ears swiveled forward, and the fur along his spine stood up in a jagged ridge. He didn't whine this time. He let out a low, resonant growl that vibrated through the wooden table, a sound far too deep and menacing for an animal of his size. He hears something, Elias whispered, grabbing his rifle. Lena moved to the window, peering through the slats of the blinds. Her face went pale. Black SUVs, 3 of them. They just turned off the logging road, no license plates. They tracked the signal to the cabin before we killed it, Elias said, his mind racing. They know he's here. We can't outrun them in my Rover, Lena said, her voice tight but controlled. And we can't fight a paramilitary team. We don't have to fight, Elias said, moving to the center of the room. He kicked the heavy woven rug aside, revealing a trapdoor with a recessed iron ring. We just have to disappear. It was a root cellar, a remnant of the homestead's original 1920s construction, reinforced by Elias for tornado season. It was deep, cool, and lined with concrete. Get down there, Elias ordered, handing Lena the flashlight. He scooped up Raji. The cub resisted for a fraction of a second, his instincts screaming to stand and fight, the genetic modification overriding his natural self-preservation. But when Elias looked him in the eye and gave a sharp quiet, the bond they had formed took over. Raji went limp in his arms. Elias descended into the darkness, pulling the heavy trapdoor shut above them. He locked it from the inside just as the sound of heavy boots hit the porch. Boom, boom, boom. They didn't knock, they breached. The front door splintered inward with a crash that echoed in the cramped cellar. Below the floorboards, the 3 of them huddled in the dark. Lena held her breath, her hand pressed over her mouth. Elias crouched over Raji, wrapping his arms around the cub's chest, feeling the frantic, powerful thrum of the animal's heart. Above them, the cabin was being torn apart. Furniture was overturned, glass shattered. Heavy footsteps moved methodically across the floorboards, inches above their heads. "Clear left," a muffled voice shouted. "Target not secure. I have blood traces on the table, fresh." Raji tensed. In the pitch black, his eyes were glowing, not reflecting light, but seemingly burning with an internal chemical luminance. He opened his mouth to roar, a challenge to the intruders. Elias did the only thing he could. He buried his face in the cub's neck, whispering barely audible nonsense into his ear, mimicking the low grooming sounds of a mother tiger. "You are safe. Stay. Stay." The cub's jaw snapped shut. He didn't roar. Instead, he pressed his wet nose into Elias's neck and exhaled. "Commander," a voice shouted from above, "I found the canister. The chip is inside." A pause, then the sound of boots scraping against wood. "They cut it out. Smart. The signal ends here." "Search the perimeter," the commander ordered. "They can't have gone far on foot. Kill the witnesses. Secure the asset." The footsteps receded. The engines revved. The SUVs tore away, tires spinning in the mud, heading deeper into the forest, chasing a ghost. Elias didn't move for a full hour. Only when the silence of the forest returned, the chirping of birds, the rustle of wind, did he exhale. "They're gone," Lena whispered, shaking. Elias looked down at Raji. The cub was looking up at him in the dark, calm and collected. "They're gone for now," Elias said, "but they think we're running through the woods. That buys us a head start." The trapdoor creaked open, pushing aside a pile of shattered porcelain. The cabin was a wreck, mattresses slashed, drawers emptied, the smell of aggressive intrusion hanging in the air. "They'll be back," Lena said, dusting concrete dust from her coat. "When they don't find us in the woods, they'll come back to burn this place down to cover their tracks." "Let them," Elias said, grabbing a hidden duffel bag from behind the wood stove, the one he'd kept packed for 10 years. "We won't be here." He walked to the door. Raji trotted beside him. The sedative had fully worn off and the fear was gone. In its place was a sleek, predatory confidence. The cub moved with a fluidity that was mesmerizing and terrifying. He stopped at the threshold, tasting the air, his blue eyes scanning the tree line. He wasn't looking for a place to hide. He was looking for a threat to neutralize. "Where do we go?" Lena asked, looking at her ruined Land Rover through the window. "They have satellites, they have thermal." "The Blackwood Reserve has 6 million acres," Elias said, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. "And the northern quadrant has iron ore deposits that scramble thermal imaging. It's a ghost zone. I used to patrol it. No one goes there." He looked down at Raji. The cub looked up, then let out a soft chuff, nudging Elias's hand. The contract was sealed. They had saved him, and now he would grow strong enough to save them. "They wanted a weapon," Elias whispered, stepping off the porch into the deep, endless green of the forest. "Now they have 3.